Welcome to Buckets, brought to you by BetMGM, the king of sportsbooks. My name's Matt Moore, senior NBA writer for the Action Network. Just back from Indianapolis, where got to experience the sights and the sounds and the drama and the intensity of All-Star Weekend. It was good. I will say this. Indy did fine. There's complaints about the weather. Not as bad as New York. Just gonna say that. Not as bad as Toronto. It was fine. They did an okay job. They got hit with a weird snowstorm, but Indy did fine. Loved the celebration of basketball. That's the best part about the weekend is how it celebrates basketball. All the stuff that they do for fans is actually really cool. If you're a fan of basketball and you go to All-Star Weekend, you're going to find cool stuff to do. Just don't, what's the word? Go to any of the fucking NBA events because they're all a joke. Sorry. Look, I love the NBA. I talk about the NBA 300 days of the year. Okay? More than that. Probably 340 days of the year. Maybe more than that. That said, All-Star's broken and done. I had a thread on Twitter in which I argue that they need to move it back into fall and actually do it before the season. Have a big celebration of basketball before the season and preseason when there's not an expectation of anything competitive, and then hold the IST in January or in early February after the NFL Conference Championships. Do it that following weekend during the Pro Bowl. And you have the IST and everyone can go out to Vegas and have this big weekend in Vegas. That would be great. And you could even do it. If you did that, you could be like, hey, you get to go this year. It'd be like, hey, you get to go to the IST and then you can just stay a week or come back for the Super Bowl. All makes more sense to me. The All-Star game is dead. Congrats to Mac McClung for back-to-back dunk championships. Congrats to Jaylen Brown for whatever it is that he did to convince the league to just put him in the final. Shout to Jacob Toppin, who honestly deserved to be in that final. His dunk, one of the more underrated ones that we've seen. That was an incredibly difficult dunk that he completed that should have gotten him into the finals. That was bullshit. Congrats to Damian Lillard for once again fucking me over by hitting his starry shots. Once again, can't hit a three-pointer in the regular season, but he can hit these goddamn starry shots. I hate the starry shots. I want them to go away. Tyrese... I got Joe Delera and Jim Turvey here, the Future Jays. Glad to have you guys with us. We're going to talk about NBA futures today. In the Action Network app, which you can download right now, has all sorts of cool stuff that you can find. We all tracked our kind of stuff. Jim, are you with me that the tiebreaker out of the first round, instead of just advancing them to the finals, was the dumbest goddamn thing in the world and screwed bettors incredibly? Because I think if you give Hallie the rest of the way, I think Halliburton is live to win that thing.
Well, I saw some people pointing out that it was pretty funny to have a 4-way tiebreaker because we had to have 3 people in the final. This is all made up. It's all nonsense. Let's just roll it over and take 2 more seconds and have one more person compete in the final. None of it made any sense. The whole weekend was. I usually kind of roll my eyes at how much people hate on All-Star Weekend. I thought this was probably the worst weekend in a while. I've actually thought some of the past ones. Yeah, I'm finally now here on the that was pathetic. The dunk contest was definitely the worst. The All-Star game itself was among the worst in recent memory. I love the Steph versus Sabrina, and I hope that kind of sets up something that they do in the future. I'm hearing a lot of people, I think Reggie on the broadcast even brought up, let's get this 2-on-2 next year, add Dame and Caitlin Clark. That would be super cool. But yeah, the weekend as a whole it left a lot to be desired. And I'll say if you followed, especially some of our people who are really cooking here on the weekend of Action, Joe, you found edges on 100 different things. It was amazing. So from that perspective, I didn't hate it there, but yeah, overall it left a lot to be desired.
Joe killed it. Joe, take a victory lap. You absolutely slaughtered this weekend in terms of Saturday night. You did so well. Joe was telling me before the show that he actually had a bet on Karl Anthony Towns to score the most points in the All-Star game. Not MVP. He takes the most points. The West loses and he wins. Joe, take a lap, buddy. You did awesome.
It was just one of those dumb bets that I wish I logged for everybody, but it was kind of I'm shooting from the hip at the right before I was like, this line seems really long. Cat can score. So and everybody was kind of giving him shit for saying he doesn't belong on the team, he's the worst one. Of course he goes out and scores a 50 burger. So that was fun. And then the starry shots, I hate the starry shot, but when we were getting plus odds on every player to make 1+, that was it was a no-brainer. And we had 5 of the 8 guys do it. So that was definitely like a really profitable spot. And, you know, Mac McClung dunk contest. So it was a good time. Like we had some fun there. I wish Laurie hit like literally any of his Moneyball rack, and we probably would be sitting with a Laurie ticket too. But that was it was fun. Like, you know, I think you just have to kind of take everything with a grain of salt, and there's a way to enjoy it. But it is a lesson though that these lines are very, very tough for the books to set for the All-Star game. So it's like, even if you don't really have a great feel on like an over and under, a lot of times like you can find opportunities where you can bet both and guarantee money, like, because there's plus money on each side or whatever. So these lines are soft, and there's like huge discrepancies a lot of time because there's just a huge lack of information.
Big weekend for Dame after not an impressive regular season. Just came in and absolutely killed it. So good on Dame for winning 3-point contest and All-Star Game MVP, as the East takes home the win in score. I look, I will watch Wizards and Hornets. I'm gonna watch like Spurs versus Rockets. I'm gonna watch I watch all this stuff, and I really do love it. Like, I love it. I will go back and spend hours just like breaking down like a random dude, all of his clips. I didn't watch the second of the All-Star game. Just gonna tell you, because there are better things to do with your time. Also, by the way, my sympathies to number one Starry fan Matt Mitchell, who did not bet on Damian Lillard to win because of the Starry shots and then douse himself in Starry. I did send him, there was a giant Starry court where if you made buckets, you actually got like cans or cases of Starry. And I sent him clips of that court. So next year we'll have to get Matt Mitchell out to San Francisco so he can compete in that contest. All right. Let's get to business. So the All-Star break is over, which means we've reached the halfway point of the season. Wait, no, that's not right. We only have less than 30 games remaining. This is the stretch run. Things are about to get fucking messy in the NBA. As a little bit of a layout, the next 2 weeks of basketball are going to be awesome. Guys are rested. They've spent 7 to 10 days completely off. Their bodies are going to feel much better. They're going to have gotten a mental break from the game. They're going to feel way better. And so we're going to get 2 weeks of really awesome basketball. And then March is going to come. And then you're going to have half the teams downshifting because they're like, we got to get healthy for the playoffs. And we're just going to get through this next month. And then you're going to have like the other half basically being like, our season's over. Who cares? We're just, I'm here so I don't get fined. March is very messy, but there's still a lot of stuff that we can bet live in season. And so based off of that, we do have some opportunities to bet some things. So we're going to talk about that on today's show. We're going to talk about regular season win totals. We're going to talk about division odds, and we're going to hit awards. So we're not going to hit MVP, and we're not going to touch on playoff futures. The reason is that you're going to be able to hear that on the Action Network podcast. It's just, if you're not a subscriber, you should be. Look for the Action Network podcast. It's me and Sean Little along with a guest. We're going to break that down a little bit later. That'll be in your feeds on Tuesday is when you'll find that show. We'll hit title futures and all of that stuff along with MVP, but we're going to hit the other awards today. We've got some good stuff for you here with the Future Jays. Let's start with some regular season win total stuff. We can start this kind of anywhere, but I want to go ahead and I want to start right off the bat with the Denver Nuggets and an underplay on them at 55.5, because I want to ask the both of you this question. The Nuggets at this number, essentially, I got them at 56.5 when it first opened. And I got that number first. I believe this number has value. I already have a large position. And I've bet they're under several times through the season because every statistical indicator is like, this team does not profile from a point differential perspective like a 56 win team plus. That's not what they look like. They have hit a huge slide and have come back down over the lot. Like, they're on a 3-game losing streak, blowout losses to the Kings and the Bucks, and then blew a game at home before the All-Star break. They're going to be healthier, and that's a key here. This is more of a lab question of, Jim, I'll start with you. If you already have a big position like me on something, but you're at an independent point in the season, I'm when did I bet that? 4 or 5 months from when I bet the original position. And in this moment, I still think that there's value on the under. Is it a good idea to be like, no, look, you find value right now still on the under. it's okay to bet it again? Or is it one of those where you've already bet this number, you already have your position, you should leave it alone? Setting aside bankroll management, I more question like the strategy of if you have a position already versus this number and you feel like there's a value here, should you rebet it?
Yeah, I think as always, the answer isn't a binary. It's a case by case basis. I think I have one that I'm going to bring up later that is a team that I've been on under all season, and I'm going to add to it. Nuggets are one that you have looked at all season, and you feel that edge is there. I think you don't maybe double down. I don't think you put as much, but I don't see anything wrong with, even if you already have a position. If you've reassessed and you look and you're still making this number to be too high, I really don't see anything wrong with adding to a position. Sometimes if you can leverage previous positions to get like a pretty tasty middle, but in this case it hasn't moved enough for Denver to have that middle, and I don't think they've shown us enough to make it to the point where I'd want to go for an under with them. I personally I'm content sitting on what I have with Denver, but I also would not say if people out there or anyone looks at it, assesses it, says that they still see value on it, I don't see any reason not to add to it. I don't think just because you have a previous position means you should be scared out of betting it again if you still see value on it.
Joe, what do you think?
Yeah, I'm with Jim there. I don't hate buying in on positions even at like worse numbers, because a lot of times I know you kind of make this comment a lot of times with the playoffs, right? And it's about like having more information, or there's more certainty to your angle. So I think a lot of times, like when you buy into a position early, you obviously have less certainty. And then there's also more time that has to go from the time that you make the, like, let's call it an investment. By the time you make the investment and the time that you're going to get the return or the potential return, there's more time. So especially at this point, in terms of a win total, I don't mind laying portions of my bankroll on a bet that I've already made, because there is a lot less time that it has to be sitting locked up and tied up into a bet. There's obviously like the time value of money that I think is important to consider, especially in like a futures context where, if you're deploying your bankroll in particular ways, right now it's like there's less variance in terms of like what the injuries that could happen or things like that. Like there's less games. And like, it's like, look, this is the way that I'm modeling it. And even if we look at Basketball Reference, they do projections, and they have the Denver Nuggets that are projected 52.5 wins for the rest of the season. So I don't hate adding to a position, especially now where, you have a little bit more of an idea of like how this team has played and probably how they will continue to play for the rest of the season.
Two more general comments about this. So we have win totals for all 30 teams. I looked at their win totals, and then I've got my numbers, and I've got the difference between them, and I've got the actual, like, if you just take their win percentage and you apply it across the for 82 games, what is that? How many wins did they wind up then? And then I looked at the difference between them. Here's what's interesting, okay? Let's forget my numbers for a second, because you can believe it or not believe in my process. But if you just take the regular season win performance right now, their winning percentage, and you cross it by 82 games, and then you subtract the win total, or subtract that from the win totals that are in the market, okay? And you get those averages, and then you get that differential, and then you average the differences, it's a +1. So what does that mean? That means that on average, these totals are one win higher than what they're projected to do right now, even though we're entering into a time when we're going to see more injuries, we're going to see more rest, we're going to see more strategic positioning, whether it's for draft capital or for seeding positioning. If you're like, I don't want to be in the 3 seed, I want to be in the 4, I want to stay out of that bracket. For me, like, there's all of these ways in which I will say this. I think my general point is unders are more valuable right now than overs, because these numbers are also, because it's so close, it's like, well, it's only one win, Matt. That inherently is wrong, because that's got to assume that you're going to have roughly the same level of health that you're going to this season. Now, if we're talking about a team that's very injured, and we'll get to that they have the potential to then outperform, then I think that maybe you're like, okay, their health might regress in this last month of the season, or it's already regressed and that's not reflected in the market. That's like, an approach that you can take. But in general, like, I would look for unders in this market first. And that's a general win total comment in most sports, including especially the NFL. But in this moment in particular, what the market is telling me right now is they're like, oh yeah, like, teams are going to be basically what they've been so far. these are not the same teams that we saw in November. Not very, like, there's a lot that's the same, but there's a lot of different changes here that can change these things and provide you with some value. Jim, give me a win total that you think really has value right now.
Yeah, I'm with you. Actually, I've got 3 of them. We can run through them all eventually. My favorite of the bunch, and I've been saying this since day one. I'm going back to the well. The Suns under 48.5. They just lost Beal. Now it sounds like it's not as serious an injury as some of the others, and now he's getting 7-8 days off to rest it up. But they really have been very pedestrian, missing any of these guys. They've been great with when their big 3 are around, but as soon as they don't have one of those big 3, they very much become like a 500 team if you look at adjusted net rating and things like that. They also have the hardest remaining schedule in the league by a fair amount. So they're going to be in that mix where they will be pushing for wins end of season. There's some other teams here that part of the cap is that what's really going to be pushing them that final week of the season. But they've also really struggled against top 10 teams in the league this season. So I think that remaining schedule being the hardest in the league for them is maybe a little bit more important than for some other teams. They have not looked great against the top tier of the league. By spread differential, they're among one. I think they're like 3rd or 4th worst in the league. So if Beal is out for any extended period of time, Durant and Booker both aren't the healthiest dudes around. The cap remains the same from the start of the season. That night to night, when all 3 guys are healthy, I really like this team. But from a zoomed out perspective, when they have to stay healthy over large periods of time, and especially against a really tough schedule, I suddenly don't like them. Most of the projection systems, Dunks and Threes and Basketball Reference, they both have them about 2 wins lower than this as well. And like you said, there is some baked in overs in here. So I am also looking towards unders in general. So Suns are probably my favorite of the 3 I have.
48.5 is the number that you want to bet against. Is that accurate? Okay. I've also got them at 46.5, which is where a lot of those projection systems have them too. Here's one element of pushback. I did look this up while you were giving the cap. So I looked at, all right, how are they when KD and Booker play? Because that was really the difference in the early season is Book was out. And like they were very inconsistent. And what that came out was they're 24-14 this season when KD and Booker play. And that's a 51 win pace. And I was like, all right, so what happens if you take out Beal? Because that's significant because Beal is more injury prone than the other 2, which, by the way, credit to Kevin Durant for having an Achilles tear and still being at this age and still being like, he's very consistent. It's actually, they're 10-6, which is still 62.5%. So there's 2 ways to look at this. One is, look, when Beal doesn't matter. As long as they got KD and Book, they're fine. The counter there would be they were fine when they had KD and Book, and Grayson Allen was playing like Ray Allen. Like that's like a big differential that has honestly been their season. Grayson has one of the best net ratings in the league differentials. The 4-man lineup of KD, Book, Grayson, and Nurk is a fucking killer. Now, I have all sorts of questions about that in the playoffs, given Nurk's inability to stay on the floor and Grayson Allen's problems in playoff series, et cetera, et cetera. But from a regular season perspective, I think that data is at least somewhat meaningful. But to your point, like I mentioned, what are the odds that KD and Book are going to stay healthy enough? I'm not talking about a major injury. I'm just talking about like, look, we got 3 weeks of the playoffs. We're sitting in the 5 seed or whatever. He's got a bad ankle. Let's take a night off. And then your winning percentage decreases on that individual game. This could be one where this is, I think this might be one where you're sweating at the end, but I very much do not, I guess I could see it. I don't think it's likely that you're going to be in a spot where it's like, oh, this was dead on April 1st. Like they hit, 50 wins on April. No, that's not going to, they're at 48 on April 1st. I don't think that's going to happen. So I think there's probably like, you're going to be in a spot where you might be able to hedge on the last night of the season, even if it doesn't come out. Would you agree it's close? Like, do you think the 46.5 is accurate, or do you think it's like even that you feel like is optimistic?
Yeah, I think even that is optimistic because they were 10-6 in those games, but yeah, there were 2 big luck factors. They played by far the softest schedule in the league when it was those 2 guys, which was great timing for them. Not great timing for us, who were fading them a little bit, but even still, they're tracking below their opening win totals for the season. The other thing was that if you looked by adjusted net rating during that time, even beyond the strength of schedule, their net they weren't blowing out those bad teams. They got pretty lucky in a couple of close games. So by win loss, they definitely were able to float with those two guys. But if you look at the net rating and if you look at the schedule, they were pretty lucky. And maybe they can get lucky. They have Booker and Durant, who are two close game killers. Like that is something that I think sometimes can get missed in projections, and it's that teams like that can slightly overperform. But I would have this just barely over 47, even accounting for those guys' abilities in close games. So I if you're playing a midseason win total, it's probably not going to go. I mean, in reality, it could potentially go a couple wins either direction. But if you look at kind of the 50th percentile, I think it's right around 47. So win and a half for the course of the rest of the season is actually a decent margin.
15 away games to just 12 home games for Phoenix the rest of the way. So a tough slate of opponents with an away heavy schedule as well. Joe, you got any thoughts on that before I get one from you?
No, I think that your inclination is right on both of them. The schedule is just brutal, and there's a lot of teams that I think are going to be actively trying. Like it's not just good teams that are maybe coasting. They're looking at some teams that are really fighting for a position, especially in the Western Conference.
Okay. All right, Joe, give me one that you've got on the slate.
I still think that you can fade Miami a little bit. I keep bringing them up, but the line is at their win total is at 46.5. Basketball Reference has them projected still at they're coming in 8th with a 44 and 38 finishing record. Basically, when I look at Miami dealing with the number of injuries that they have, and I don't think, especially now with Jacques Vaughn being fired, Chicago not really making any moves. When we look at the Eastern Conference standings in particular, right? Miami's in 7th right now. I think to get to a 46.5 win total is a pretty big ask, especially when I think that just given what we've looked at with Miami, and I think that there's like some mumblings, right? But like Terry Rozier gets hurt again. Jimmy Butler obviously is missing some time with some personal issues. Hopefully that's like okay by the time the All-Star break runs around. But at the end of the day, Miami is a team that's not super focused on the regular season. So asking them to win 17 more games through the rest of the season, I think is a relatively tough ask. So I think that if you didn't have a preseason position, or even if you did, we're still kind of looking at the preseason number. The preseason number I think was 48.5. It kind of got steamed down to 47.5. I think if you can get a 46.5 and like an under, I think that's still fine, in large part because I don't think that they're super concerned about playing any of these teams, honestly, in the play-in tournament. They're 7th right now. The only really tough matchup in this range, right? Like they're close to the Indiana, they're close to Orlando. They're all relatively similar record wise, but they shouldn't fall out with Chicago, Atlanta, and then the Nets really behind them. So I don't think they're going to fall out. And I think that they're in a good position to just kind of try to stay healthy going into the postseason.
So I will say this is a very good way in this. You're going to have this market for a few more days, and we'll see win totals drop off because it's no longer worth it for the books to have the exposure. This is a good way to fade Miami. And I will say this is better than don't get suckered in on the division. I would say do not take, because right now at BetMGM, King of Sportsbooks, the Orlando Magic are plus 110 to win this division. And from a standing standpoint, you're going to look at this and you're going to go, look, wait, they're tied in the loss column. The Magic have the easiest remaining schedule in terms of opponent SOS. They have the easiest remaining, but Miami has the 4th easiest. Miami has one more road game than home game, and Miami has a 3-1 season series tiebreaker lock over Orlando. And that's a lot, honestly. And if you're like, they're tied though, I get it. That's a lot of factors that go in Miami's favor here. Like, I want to bet Orlando to win the division. Like, they're fun. They're fun, and the Heat are, the Heat are Soylent Green. Like, it's the book that you have to read in high school in order to do, and you have to do it a whole breakdown on it. They're the Dust chapter in in
Grapes of Wrath.
Grapes of Wrath. So that's what the Heat are. But I also think that Grapes of Wrath is a great American novel. So it's very good. Yeah. So yeah, and so that's the point here is like you can take the individual I think on this, because when we kind of look at the numbers, the number in the market to kind of repeat it is there's a 46.5. Their pace for this season, they're currently on a 45 win pace. That's just win total. Or just like win percentage. I've got them at projected at 44.6. So I like them even less, which is not surprising. Their numbers are never going to look really good on paper. I do think there's probably value on this. I'm not sure I want to get on it just because one of the problems I think that you might run into, Joe, is they're in that number range where there is a little bit added incentive. The difference between 49 and 48 is less than the difference between 46 and 45. 46 and 45 can be, hey, you're in the 10 and you're going to have to go on the road for two playing games. Or that could be the difference between 6 and 5 or 6 and 7, and you've got a playoff spot or you have to play in the playing game. So that difference is a little bit more meaningful. But I don't mind the play at all. Jim, do you have thoughts on Miami?
Yeah, actually, ironically, I am almost the opposite of you in that I would rather play the Orlando division part of it, because I'm higher on Orlando, and I am worried a little bit about what you just said, which is that both these teams will have motivation to win down the stretch. They both have very easy schedules, which means that they are playing these teams that are really going to hit the off switch down the very stretch around the season here. The Charlottes, the Wizards of the world. So I do like getting Orlando at plus money. I'd want it ideally a little bit longer than plus 110. So I'm eyeing this, but I'm most likely staying away unless I could find Orlando in the division at like a plus 130, plus 135, something like that.
That's interesting. Yeah, I think it's a stay away. Like if you get a plus 135, I get it. 110, I just don't think is very appetizing. I'm looking at Orlando right now on dunks and threes. They've got the 12th best win differential in season in terms of they've won more games than they should have. And Miami, on the other hand, nope, Miami's in the bad range too. Miami's actually third on that range. So this is two teams that have outperformed expectations to a certain degree. I do think that Orlando has slid a little bit. Like they're just having a hard. They needed to make a trade for a point guard. They really needed to pull off one of those deals to just boost a little bit of scoring.
Yeah.
Because they keep running these games where like they're competitive and they just can't quite get over the hump because their offense stalls out for 4 or 5 possessions and then they're done. All right, I've got another one. Let's do the Clippers real quick. I have at least a lean here towards the Los Angeles Clippers under, actually, and I get to do this because I have appropriately built a large position on them for division and win total and champion. Like I've done, I got in on the Clippers way early. We've talked about it on the show, and I'm not just taking a victory lap here. I think it's really relevant, but the number's 55.5.
It's high.
They're at that number right now, so I get it, but there is a part of me that believes if you play your best basketball in December, January, that's really good for your playoff hopes. Like I'm a believer in that you need to play your best basketball in December, January, because after that it gets really messy and it's hard to figure out if you're good or not. They did that, and so I think they're a legit title contender. But I also don't know that they're going to play their best basketball the rest of the way. They will probably want to get Kawhi some time off. He missed that adductor game. Now he played in the All-Star game, so I'm expecting him to be back, full swing going here out of the break. But I do have them slightly under based off of this number. And look, they've done what the league has asked. The league basically made a bunch of rules that were not entirely, but definitely pointed in their direction in terms of, hey, you should play some fucking games sometimes, guys. And they've done that. Like Kawhi's played a ton of back-to-backs. I want to give him credit for that. PG's played a ton. Harden's played a ton. I do think that for them, there will be a little bit of a down ramp. And this is a very high number at this point in the season versus a team like Boston where it's only over for me. Like they're gonna win a bazillion games and they're gonna keep the pedal down, and then I don't think they're gonna rest guys. The Clippers, however, I think do have to be like, all right, we've done the thing, we've proven the thing. we'll play on the big Saturday night games whenever we've got them, or the national TV games. But maybe we start gearing down a little bit in some of these spots. And I do think this is an opportunity to sell very high on the Clippers, Joe.
Yeah, I mean, you can get their under at plus money, which I think is always nice, like especially in this circumstance where you're trying to hedge a little bit, or try to build like a position. I do think that the Clippers are a little bit savvier in terms of what they can do, like organization wise. So if they feel like they're locked into the 2-3 and it doesn't matter, like I don't think that they give one crap about playing in Oklahoma City. They do not care if they have to go to Oklahoma City. I don't really think they really care if they had to go on the road a little bit, if they had to go to Minnesota in the second round. I do think, though, that there might be a little bit of jockeying about who they might play in the first round, though, because right now it's set up with the Pelicans are in 6th, the Mavericks are in 7th, the Kings are in 8th. I think if there's an opportunity where they could play like the Kings somehow, if like the Kings move up, like I think I could totally see the Clippers wanting to like get into a matchup like that where they don't have to travel very far and against a team that I think is a little bit overrated. So I think that's, I guess, my concern with the Clippers. But I think at the end of the day, you're right. I don't think that they're going to be in a rush to get to the 1 seed, especially if that really sets up a second round matchup with Denver. I don't envision that that's a circumstance that they really want to get themselves into.
Jim, hit me with another win total. We got to keep moving here. So why don't you hit me with
for sure. Bucks under 51.5. This is another team that we have been on unders all season. Doc has not been they had the dance. They were excited to have Doc in town, and it has not been pretty since. They've been 3-7 with him. This is another team that has been lucky so far, and I think it's another team that, to a degree, you have Dame Lillard at the end of games. You have Giannis in big moments. That does help you a little bit. It means you probably a little bit outperform your net rating. But I think they've gotten extra lucky. They also have the third hardest remaining schedule, and the opponent guard defense has just gotten comical. If you have any sort of scorer, it doesn't even have to be a good player, just someone who can get buckets and is a guard. They're going to have a big night. 51.5. You can get the under at plus money. Again, I don't think this is a massive edge, but I think this is one where I think you just that number's too big for me.
A lot of us were like, ooh, they look a lot better. Their process is better. I know they lost, but their process is better. We did that for about 4 games, and then we're like, uh-oh. So, look, I do think that they profile more to me as a buy low spot here. I don't know that 51.5. This is the opposite of where I'm at with Denver, where Denver, I think, looks better to other people than they do to somebody like me that's like watching them every single night and really diving in and like has looked at their numbers and understands the dynamics of their bench, particularly on the road and stuff like that, versus the Bucks. To me, were Brandon and I hit this the second they popped on the board at 55.5, or 54.5 is when they popped. Like back in August, hit it then. Preseason, hit it again. Like we hit it first when it came out, and then Dame got traded and went back up, and then we hit it again. And then preseason came and we hit it again, and then I hit it again in season. So this is the opposite of the Denver one, where I'm like, I have already bet against this team. Like I bet, and this is part of it, is like I actually bet against a different team. Like I bet against the Adrian Griffin Bucks, and ironically the Adrian Griffin Bucks were on pace to go way over. And now the correction of that, even though they were clearly flawed and like there was a lot of problems there, they were getting wins. And now I feel like it's the opposite, where the process is way better, but they're just not getting wins. If I get a 49.5, I will hit the over on this, because that gives me a healthy 4-win hedge. It just gives me like a nice little bump here to be able to with the information that I have. But I'm good at the 54.5. This is not one that I feel like I need to bet into. Joe, I did want to get your thoughts on this one.
Yeah, I don't know if I need to like get in there to add to to get into this position. I just think that there's a little bit too much like wonkiness now too, especially with the All-Star break. Maybe there is an opportunity where Doc can kind of start putting in like things that he wants to do, seeing a little bit of like more focus after the All-Star break towards the end of the season. I think I understand it, but I don't know if I can get there. Even though like I think that fading Milwaukee is like not like a bad idea overall.
All right, so those are mine. Jim, you've got one more, I believe.
Yeah, but actually, I'm curious. I wanted to talk this through with you because my last one was Celtics under 63.5, mostly because I did not see anyone pressing them down the stretch. But it sounds like you don't think that that really matters and that they will continue to run their guys out there and run bad teams off the court.
Yeah, so I think here's the thing. I think you want to take an under here at this number, with it being 63.5, which that is like an absurdly high number.
Huge number. And it's plus money on the under, too, is the other thing.
I think you want to take it you want to take it versus teams that are either clearly not interested in regular season achievement. You can actually kind of take it on teams if they're like, we really want to press for this, because they'll burn themselves out. They'll basically blow a gasket trying to push too hard, and then kind of realize like, we got to back off a little bit. Like this is, if they get on a win streak or whatever. The thing about the Celtics is that they are not at the spot because of an incredible 10, 15 game winning streak. They're not here because of an incredible 3-point shooting performance like they were last year when I was like, this team is not that good. That's not the squad. This team has been great every single section of the season. Not just wins, point differential. They're the only team top 5 in offense and defense. And for them, they have the ability to get wins when even they're not at their best. Like when Porzingis is out, it's like, ooh, they really need Porzingis in a playoff series. They do not need Kristaps Porzingis playing the fucking Hornets on a Tuesday. So, and like they'll get caught. They get caught the same way everybody gets caught. It's not that they're not going to lose games. They're going to lose games. And this doesn't provide them with like a huge number of those to miss. But like I have them at 63.7. So I have this right on the dot. With what we talked about earlier with like, aren't they going to rest guys? Yeah, like it's under or nothing at a number of 63.5, right? I'm not like, let's go bet the over at 63.5. But I do think that there is a world in which they rest Porzingis or Tatum or Brown or whoever, and they still get to 65, 67. Like this team is a fucking wagon, and their approach is it's not, let's see how many. The Wolves are in, we got to see how many games we can win. Let's see how good we can be. That's where the Wolves are at. The Celtics are not there. The Celtics are just at, let's keep performing at a high level and showing championship habits so that we can be the best that we can be. Those are teams I do not want to fade. So I can't disagree with you that 63.5 is a really high number to try and hit. But I do think that I personally don't want any part of it, even if I would have to say like, yeah, the under juiced with plus money at that number is absolutely value, but they are enough of a machine and their gap is so significant when we look at like the strength of these teams. Like for me, it is the way that my projections have it. Like it's the Celtics and the Thunder, and then like everyone else can figure their own shit out. Those are the 2 best teams in the league. Now that doesn't mean I'm betting the Thunder to win the title, right? This is entirely regular season, but that's kind of that to me is what we've seen. And I have some bets on the Thunder and some other aspects. But that's kind of my thoughts on it. Joe, what do you think about the Celtics?
Yeah, I mean, I think that stylistically, the big thing with Boston is that like they shoot a ton of threes, even though they're not like as high in the percentages that you would think that a team like that kind of relies on 3-pointers like that would be. So it's like, even if their starters are missing, just stylistically, they can just outmath you because their bench guys and like their depth guys are all really excellent 3-point shooters. So if you get into, it's like, even if you do have a game where you're not seeing like a Tatum or a Brown or Porzingis, it's like, okay, well, Horford can shoot, Hauser can shoot, Pritchard can shoot. So I do think that you can kind of end up in that situation. It's just that I get the under. I think the under kind of makes sense at a plus number, but it's not something that I'm looking to buy right now.
Jim, what do you think about what we kind of the feedback we've given you there?
No, I think that makes perfect sense. To me, it is a lean more than the hammer spot. The hammer was Suns, and then Bucks was a lean, and Celtics is a lean. I think I'll probably bet it for a little bit, but it's not a full hammer.
I want to hit real quickly some division stuff just before we hit on, because we do have to get to some award stuff too. Northwest Division is pretty interesting. Nuggets are plus 325. The market finally got off of. They're just like, we're going to keep the Nuggets as favorites. Don't care what's happening. They did that literally for like 4 months. And then finally the Nuggets hit this skid and the books were like, okay, fine. Maybe the Nuggets aren't going to win the division. And that's, look, honestly, like it's still the difference in those three teams is Wolves are at 16 losses, Thunder at 17, and Nuggets now at 19. So that's still only a 3-win loss. Now that's significant when you only, honestly, this is one of the things I try and tell, because fans are like, look, they're only 3 games back. They can do this. I'm like, 3 games back when you're 500 is doable. 3 games back with less than 30 to go, when the other teams are winning 71% of their games, actually is pretty difficult. Like, it can do it, but it's difficult. It can just change very quickly. So the Nuggets are plus 325. The Thunder are plus 190. The Wolves are plus 100. I still have the Thunder projected as a better team than the Wolves. I will say I have them both tied at 59 wins as a close. That's why I've got them projected to finish with. By the way, we have some really high win totals. Like, we don't get a lot of 55 and a half, so we're going to get a bunch of them this year. I do think there's a little bit of value on OKC, but here's the problem, and I said we're not going to talk about MVP, and we're not. If you think the Thunder are going to win the division at plus 190, you need to go ahead and just bet Shai Gilgeous-Alexander at MVP. And that is not just based off of my analysis. Like, I asked a bunch of people this weekend that are either voters or voter adjacent, I'll put it that way, of if the Thunder win the 1 seed, who's the MVP? And the answer was, I think it's Shai. So, lot on the line for bettors here with this spot. And that includes if you're like, well, what if the Wolves win? If the Wolves win, it's Jokic. Like, even if the Thunder finish above Nikola, it's probably Nikola. You got to get the 1.
Yeah.
So that's fun for me to sweat over these remaining.
I would say, Matt, with the division, considering like your thoughts on what the Clippers are, if you can get OKC at plus 325 to be the 1 seed, do you think that that's better than Shai MVP? Because you kind of do remove a little bit of that like variance with Jokic then.
What's the number again? Tell me again.
Plus 325.
Yeah, that's probably the bet.
Yeah.
That's probably the bet.
Well, I have a proxy. I think this is the proxy division. I think if you like the Wolves, I think you should. And I want to hear your thoughts on this, Matt. You're very tapped into this kind of stuff. What do you think of betting Chris Finch for Coach of the Year? If Finch and Dagnall are going right up head to head to the final week, and the Wolves finish ahead of the Thunder, is Finch a good proxy for Wolves division instead?
Here's what's interesting. So Dagnall's a favorite, right?
Yeah.
And yet the market's saying that the Wolves are going to finish number 1.
That has confused me as well.
Right. I will say I do think that there's still a very big edge to Dagnall, in part because of coaches in particular have talked about that team is so young. And young coaches know how tough it is to get 19, 20-year-olds to play winning basketball. And this is the youngest roster in the league. So versus like Chris Finch, who I think is not disliked by his coaching peers. Now, I want to be very clear. I think Chris Finch is like a great dude. He seems very humble to me. I talked to him over the weekend. And like, he's always come across me as a very genuine and pretty humble guy. Like, he's like, I can't believe I'm here. Because like, he was coaching in Belgium before Daryl Morey tapped him for the Vipers job. That's the Rio Grande Valley Vipers, by the way. Also, go look at their merch. It's absolutely phenomenal. G League teams are the best. So I think Finch is great, but you do need to have a little bit of love from the coaches. And Finch, I think, is respected and liked, but I think that there's a real appreciation of Dagnall and what he's accomplished, of taking this young team, because also he gets all this credit for developing these guys multi-year, where it's like, took a team that was totally rebuilding and brought them all the way up. And
that's so funny to me, because I almost see it as the opposite of like young teams. They are hard to coach, but there is like natural growth. Whereas I feel like getting a system together that has Ant and Gobert and Cat and Conley probably helps, but mixing those pieces together when they're like established guys is what, to me, I would reward as a more impressive coaching job, especially if the Wolves finish on top. But I take your point well, and it does scare me off using Finch as a proxy for division there.
All right, let's go to some awards. Let's hit some award stuff. So let's start with the most improved market, because we've seen some interesting movement in this as the Philadelphia 76ers have obviously plummeted. They have lost 7 of their last 10. They're down to the 5 seed. They are only 3 games above the Heat for the 7th spot and being in the play-in tournament. And so kind of as a result of that, we've seen a little bit of movement from Maxey. He's now down to, at BetMGM, the king of sportsbooks, minus 190. Kobe White's up to plus 400. Alfred Şengün's fallen off. He's plus 750. Jonathan Kuminga's plus 800. Jalen Williams of the Thunder at 40 to 1. Scotty Barnes at 50 to 1. That number's preposterous, but it's a CLV sandwich. Jalen Johnson at 66 to 1. And Cam Thomas 100 to 1. Jim, I know you've got some thoughts on this. Let's start there with how do you kind of react to the market starting to peel back a little bit on Tyrese Maxey?
Yeah, I'm a little surprised more than anything else. Especially the Kobe White push here does not really make a lot of sense to me. So Maxey in the game since Embiid went out, the Sixers themselves have not been outstanding. He missed one of those games as well, but he's averaging 26 points, 4 rebounds, 5.6 assists. The numbers are going to be there. They are going to hold on. They're not going to miss the playoffs entirely. I don't see how you make the case one-on-one for Kobe White over Tyrese Maxey. Now, Kuminga is a little bit more scary as someone who really would love to see Maxey see this through here. Kuminga does scare me a little bit more, especially because I'm high on the Warriors to make a little run here, make a little push, and maybe even get into that top 6 and not have to be in the play-in. But I don't see why this push from Kobe White here. So I saw you reacting there. So are you on Kobe White? Do you see this as a head-to-head that he can top Maxey?
No. So I have 2 independent thoughts here. 1, I think Kobe White should win Most Improved Player, and 2, Tyrese Maxey is absolutely going to win Most Improved Player. Voters are human, and if you talk to them as much as like if I say the media, quite honestly, a lot of fans think it's Stephen A. Smith. Okay. And I want to be very clear on this. You will change your mind about how good of a journalist Stephen A. Smith is if you see him work the room at All-Star Weekend, because that dude works the room. All-Stars stop what they're doing to change direction, come over and give him a hug. And you're like, oh, okay. And that changes your perception of him. Like, I got nothing but respect for Stephen A. My point here is that it's not people yelling and throwing out constant criticism and having really spicy hot takes on the morning shows. Some of those guys have votes, but for the most part, it's not. And what you do have is like the vote is a weight. There's a reason that so many people are giving up their votes. It's a burden. And the reason I bring that up here is there will be I'm not going to dock Maxey because Joel got hurt. That's not his fault. Like, Maxey's played great. Maxey's put up the numbers. Maxey was a first-time All-Star. Maxey's the second best player on a team that was on pace to be second in the Eastern Conference. Just because of course they fell off when Joel got hurt. That's not Maxey's fault. And so Maxey's going to win this award because he did enough before the injury. He got 40 games in that even if his numbers slide, it's not going to be enough. My problem here, and this is more of the reason I mentioned Kobe, is it's more of a deal with like what you think about when you assess this award. Maxey was really good last year, and he got hurt. And I had a huge position on Maxey last year for Most Improved, and I'm very mad that now he's going to win it. Because one of the reasons I didn't bet it, because I was like, oh, his window was last year. Now everyone will realize that he was already this good, and they won't vote for him. No one was paying attention, apparently. Just like no one fucking paying attention to how good Tyrese Maxey was last year. And so like the jump that Tyrese has made this year is mostly just like James Harden left, and he got the ball more. Now, I'm not saying Tyrese isn't better, because he's way better. He worked on his passing. He worked on his change of speed stuff. His performance has been absolutely phenomenal. Like, Tyrese Maxey is an all-star. He is an incredible young player. Kobe White was a guy that I was like, I don't know if this guy's going to be in the league in 4 years. And now I'm like, oh, wow, he is a legitimately really good point guard. Not just a good player, a good point guard, which is difficult in the NBA. He has learned to manage the offense. He has learned to make reads out of the pick and roll. He has learned to play on and off ball. His versatility is very important. And when he has played and Zach LaVine has not, they have played at a rate that would have them solidly in the playoffs. So I think Kobe White is very much deserving, but this is a CLV sandwich, and you should absolutely be betting Tyrese Maxey at any number below 200, and even 200, I'm putting it in a parlay at a book. I'm going to be putting that in a parlay with Jokic because how can I put this? I am over leveraged to fuck on Shai Gilgeous-Alexander and didn't really realize it until this weekend. So I got to do that. Joe, do you have thoughts on most improved?
Yeah, so I think that a lot of what you said makes sense, especially with the fact that, voters, I think going into the season thought it was going to be Maxey's, and then Maxey hasn't done anything to lose it. I will say over the last 20 games, Kobe White is putting up comparable numbers, if not better numbers than Maxey. Maxey's averaging 25 and a half, 3.3 rebounds, 6.3 assists. Kobe White's at 23, 5.5 rebounds and 6.2 assists. So the numbers are like pretty identical. And honestly, I think part of it has to do with the fact that like if there is a little bit of resistance now, it's not that like they want to penalize him for Joel being hurt, but it's a little bit more of, well, hey, like guess what? You're the number one option right now, and it's not going great like on like a night to night basis because teams are making you like you're the focus of those meetings when they're game planning. It's not like, all right, like we got to try to take Joel away and then we'll see what we can do to slow down Maxey a little bit. Now it's just like, hey, we're going to throw doubles and traps at you all game. Like let Tobias Harris beat us. And that's really what's going on here. So I think that Maxey, especially if he can kind of learn from this and finish strong, I think that this actually is presenting him with an opportunity to really like nail down his case, with like this type of focus on him from a defensive perspective whenever they do play other teams.
I have a pop quiz for you. Who has had better numbers this season? Tyrese Maxey or Desmond Bane across the board?
I think
Desmond Bane.
It's probably Bane, yeah.
It's Bane. It's Bane, and you're like, well, yeah, but but Maxey plays with Embiid. Okay, sure, but that's kind of the point here. Is like Embiid draws a lot of attention versus the Grizzlies have no one to draw attention except for Jaren Jackson, and Bane has put up 24 points to 24.4 to Maxey's 25.7. He's got him beat in rebounds. He is behind him by only 1.3 in assists, which is crazy given the Grizzlies are playing with like hustle dudes. And Bane's got him in steals, blocks, field goal percentage, 3-point percentage, free throw percentage, effective field goal percentage, and BPM. Not that I'm mad that I had a big position on Desmond Bane at all. Let's talk Coach of the Year. We already kind of hit on it about how to bet this with the Thunder and those. Dagnall's 195, Finch is 250, Bickerstaff's 400, Tyronn Lue's 500, Missoula's 16-1, Carlisle 16-1, Tibbs is 25-1, Malone's 50-1 because he'll never win this award, Jamal Mosley 50-1. So I do think that the Dags should be the favorite. I do think that now again, like I think the Thunder are going to get the 1 seed, so this all lines up for me and makes logical sense. If you don't, then Finch inherently has to have value. If he like, to Jim's point, I'll say this: there's no scenario in which Finch the Wolves finish ahead of the Thunder, and there's not value on Chris Finch right now. Because if we get to the end of the season and it's like the Wolves do finish with a better record, having a better record has to count against it. It's just a matter of how much you think the gap is. The books are basically saying Finch can finish above him, but he's got a veteran team with a multi-time defensive player of the year in Anthony Edwards. But here's what's interesting is like, okay, Shai Gilgeous-Alexander is number 2 for MVP. He has the second most valuable player in the league by the market. And yet what Mark Daigneault's doing is considered more impressive. That's like an interesting talent versus team makeup kind of thing here. I have some thoughts on the longer stuff, but Jim, I want to get your thoughts on Coach of the Year.
Yeah, I mean, I won't run back too much of it because we did cover it earlier. I think my biggest thing is I am higher on how the Wolves will finish the year than the Thunder. And so I do see a little bit of value on Finch strictly from it's so hard sometimes to remove ourselves from these. You just went on that whole big thing on Kobe White should be the one who wins it. And it's very important to, when we approach these, I'm seeing, Chris Finch should win this, but that's not where you're betting. You're betting who will win this. So based on what you said earlier, I think I'm fine sitting this market out right now. If I want to be on the Wolves or fade the Thunder, I can find other ways to do it. I do think among the longer numbers, I'm not sure if Missoula is the name that you'll throw out. He's the only name there that even vaguely intrigues me. But overall, I'm pretty okay sitting this market out right now.
Yeah. From a logical standpoint, if we're going to play the logic game here, I do want to say, like, here's a fun logic game. Okay. The Thunder have Shai Gilgeous-Alexander and have been almost entirely healthy. JB Bickerstaff has Donovan Mitchell, who is not on the MVP top 5 in the straw poll, and has missed Darius Garland and Evan Mobley for multiple months of the season, and yet are on pace to win the division for the first time since 2000, for the Bucks not to win the division for the first time since 2018. And yet JB Bickerstaff is a dog at 4-1. Like, JB Bickerstaff has done the most here. Like, he's done the most. I don't think he wins because I look at all these types of things. You're right on Missoula because I do I try and think about from a voting perspective, what's my blind spot? Because we're influenced by the markets. If the market tells us that X is a favorite, a lot of the time we're like, there's got to be a reason for that. And I'll just tell you, like, nope, that's not how this works. The voters can have an entirely different idea, and the books are not polling the voters, I promise you. I would know about that. And so I feel confident I would know about that. They might have, one or two that they, asked, they gather sources, they gather information. That's fine. But my point here is, Missoula, look, if they don't give it to Dags and they don't give it to Finch, which I think would be a huge oversight given what those guys have accomplished. I keep bringing up the coaches. The coaches are going to elect their own. That's not this award. The sports writers determine this award that you can bet on. But the coaches are going to determine their own. But the bigger thing is that they get asked more for their input on who should win Coach of the Year than players get asked who should be the MVP. Because there's a lot more politics and money involved in MVP. And coaches are actually pretty honest about, like, it should be this guy. He's been really great. I do think Dagnall has gotten a lot of respect for what he's done and how he, like, the bigger thing with OKC, Jim, honestly, that I would tell you, there is a perception of the way the Thunder play. They are a nightmare to play against. The Wolves are just as good of a team, but the Thunder are so well coached. In part because of what you were kind of talked about, which is it's easier to get young guys to buy in versus, like, Anthony Edwards is going to do what Anthony Edwards does because it's Anthony Edwards. Like, there's actually a challenge to getting talent to coordinate. I've said this for years. That's why Spo should have won Coach of the Year back in the Heatles days. I've gone long here. Joe, what are your thoughts on Coach of the Year?
Yeah, I'm not super interested in the market. I think that the points about JB Bickerstaff, I think it's just tough because he's going to have to overcome, like, what happened last year in the playoffs, realistically. And I think that these markets tend to be sticky. So I do think that, maybe there's an opportunity for Missoula if Boston just goes crazy. But I think, like, at that point, like, I think I'd just rather bet them to, like, have, like, a win threshold, like a 65 plus or like something like that. Because I still think that even then there's the opportunity where one of these other guys like Dagnall or Finch could win. So I'm comfortable sitting the market out. I don't need an angle in this spot.
Let's go 6th man of the year. We have a new favorite. Malik Monk has finally overcome the Tim Hardaway Jr. reign of tyranny because I still don't understand. Like, Tim might win just because of the numbers. That's fine. But, like, no one's talking about, like, wow, Tim Hardaway Jr., what a contributor. He's just like a guy. And he's started a bunch of games. Like, Tim's good. Tim's a good player, but it's really weird. There's no narrative behind 6th man of the year for Tim Hardaway Jr. Malik Monk's the new favorite, plus 100. THJ is plus 175. Norman Powell has moved up the ranks to plus 750. God, I wanted him to win last year. Karis LeVert is 20-1. Bogdanovich all the way down to 25-1 because people realized, the Hawks suck. And Jordan Clarkson, sadly, as the Jazz go the other direction, 33-1. It was a brief shining moment. And then yet another example, Jim, of why I need to not bet these borderline 500 team award members because of it's such a razor's edge between they could skyrocket and go on a run, or they could lose to the Warriors and Lakers at home, and that's pretty much going to do it for them. Anyway, what are your thoughts on 6th man of the year?
Yeah, this is the one that I'm really bummed about. I had Tim Hardaway at a nice long number. I never felt good about it, so I was looking at all the different spots, and I just couldn't talk myself into Monk. But I'm here now. I hope it's not chasing. It's mostly just that I now see value in him. If you, like you said, I think he's plus 100. I think he should now be the heavy favorite. I'm going to add a touch. This is one of those. Sometimes you just got to write off an award as, I had a good position. I'm going to make it so that I don't lose money on this market. But I'm not going to have a big number on it. Tim Hardaway Jr. since the trade deadline, it's only 3 games, so very small sample, but pretty notable. His minutes are down over 5 minutes a game. They weren't like for like guys that came in. I think it's more that they're just finally returning to health a little bit, and there's just more players in the rotation as a whole. He's only scoring 7.7 points per game in those, again, admittedly very small sample. Meanwhile, Monk this month is at 40 points, 4 rebounds, 5 assists. That Kings team is still hanging around the playoffs. He's been a very key part of it, more to your point of, actual impact wise, who is doing their job off the bench. He's often out there closing games and getting late buckets for them. At a plus, if you can get plus 100 on it, I do think there is some value here. If you followed us the whole time, if you followed me and had Hardaway at a good number, I think we leverage this to make sure we don't lose money in this market. But don't go crazy chasing it down because there's still a couple months, and this is such a weird award as well. So
Yeah, I struggle with this award because I don't think that Sacramento is as good as their record. So I'm concerned about Sacramento falling like deeper into the play-in. And then it's like, do I want a plus 100 ticket on Malik Monk if I think, maybe Dallas has like a slightly higher chance of like moving up, that type of thing. So this is a really tough market because I think that there really hasn't been a player in my mind that's really like separated themselves from the field. So I do think that there seems to be some opportunity to like bet around it. I don't really have any positions on this. I had a Chris Paul position that's just dead now. So like that's kind of like its own point, but I feel like it's one of those awards that like I don't think you need to get into if you don't have a position already. Yeah. It's just this is an award where there's just been nobody that's really been like outstanding. So it's like I have trouble picking anybody.
So this might be the opposite of what we talk about with like the who should versus who will. This might be the opposite of that. I refer to those guys as the Joe Ingles, Brandon Anderson award because Brandon was like, Joe Ingles should win this. And I was like, but he's not going to. He's like, he should win this. He kept betting it. And then I'm like, he's not going to win it, man. And Brandon's got like a million of those on me. But that's just, it's like the thing I think of here. But I do think, look, if we accept that there's nobody who's set themselves aside with the narrative and there's nobody who's clearly ahead with the stats, they're all 16, 17, 15 points per game. It should kind of come down to who do you feel like has played the best? And to me, that's Malik Monk. Yeah. Like, and I think that most voters are going to be like, man, Malik's been awesome for them. Like I remember so many games where he's come up huge for them and delivered down the stretch and he's closed games versus like, respectfully, Jim, no one is like, remember how Tim Hardaway Jr. carried the Mavericks late in that game? No. Yeah. Right?
And about any of these guys, Norm Powell, I love Norm Powell, but can you remember like a Norm Powell carrying the Clippers down the stretch? I certainly can't.
He's more of like he's that guy that fills in and kind of completes a lot of those lineups and makes them like their minutes with him are really great. Like the minutes with Powell and the starters are awesome and they're better than the alternatives. But a lot of that's honestly just like.
But Monk is the guy who is the most memorable from this category. I think it's a very good point of at the end, if they're all even, it's like, well, who's just the best? And Monk, I think, has had the best season, the most memorable of the seasons.
And he definitely has the most assists. So like, it's not even close. So like in terms of elevating the team and like points responsible for, he doesn't lead in points per game, but I guarantee you he leads in points that he's responsible for.
We'll wrap up with clutch, but we want to hit. I want to just go ahead and real briefly hit on the other two markets. We are all in agreement. There's no value on defensive player of the year. Rudy Gobert is going to win it. He's a huge minus number. You can still bet it because for me, it's like it should be minus 1,000. But nobody's going to be like, ooh, yeah, I really want to bet minus 600, minus 700 on him. Victor Wembanyama is going to win Rookie of the Year. Chet Holmgren, I stand by the advice that we gave, which is bet whoever was a plus early in the season because it was very, very borderline. But Chet's hit a bit of a rookie wall, and once Victor moved to full-time center and they gave him a point guard, he's been great, and he's been sensational, and he's been clearly the best player. The game versus the Raptors last week in particular was the best game I've seen hit from him this season and shows his potential in terms of he single-handedly destroyed that team. Like Victor Wembanyama destroyed an NBA team as the number one guy for the entire duration of the game. And Chet Holmgren, as good as he is, doesn't do that because he's not asked to do that. And that's okay. Chet's going to finish second and be very deserving and very awesome. And he's going to go to the playoffs, and Victor's not. But Victor Wembanyama is absolutely going to win Rookie of the Year. Let's go to clutch player and close with that. So, like, very quietly, Steph has kind of crept up here as they started to actually win games. And now he's starting to get like a real advantage in this market as the favorite to win clutch player of the year. Currently in the market, you will find Stephen Curry as the leader at -160. Shai Gilgeous-Alexander is +600. Dame is 7-1. Luka is 19-1. Jalen Brunson is 19-1. And LeBron James is 19-1. Jim, what are your thoughts on clutch player of the year?
Yeah, this one is one that, we've talked about how this is a weird award. It's a new award, but NBA First Three on Twitter, if you follow him, he wrote a great piece for Action about a month ago. And he and I have been kind of working on this award. I wrote one earlier in the year, and he and I kind of collaborated on both of them. And he pegged Curry as the guy a month ago. So really hope you found that at the time, because I do think he's running away with this. So we've talked about how, if you define clutch points, NBA.com defines as game within 5 points, under 5 minutes to go. He has 165 points in those situations. That's 57 more than any other player. That's been a really good proxy for this award in its short existence. That's 65 more than Dame, 78 more than Shai, who are the other two names at number 2 and 3 in the odds. He also has 7 shots in the final 5 seconds to either tie or take the lead this season. That's pretty insane. In terms of actual game winners, I think he's got one, that maybe 2 of those as well. And it's big moments too. He really has been just popping up kind of all season as they play these really tight games. He's obviously their go-to guy in those moments. That's part of it. The field goal attempts are through the roof. This is, because it's a weird award, you can shop it around a little bit. -165 is pretty juicy. I saw like a -120 out there. I like that obviously a lot more, because this is a weird award. To lay big minus money for several months is a little bit scary. But I think he's in a great position right now, and I would definitely take, I would take that -165 at maybe a little bit smaller amount. But if you can shop around -120 is really good.
So Jim's analysis is spot on. In terms of try and think about how are the voters going to vote for this award. Like, what are they going to look at? They're just going to pull up the clutch stat on NBA.com. Yeah. That's all they're going to do. Yeah. Now, there are better ways to do it. If we want to talk about shoulds, right? I just pulled up on StatHead, Shot Finder, and pulled up last 2 minutes shots to tie or take the lead. Guess who leads? Not Steph Curry. It's Giannis Antetokounmpo. He's got 14 of those this season. Steph has 12 in the final 2 minutes. But clutch time is the last 5 minutes. So it's like in the last 5 minutes, you're clutch. Is that really like the clutchest shots? I would argue it's probably the last 2 minutes when you're trying to get a lead to actually win the game. Because if you are making a bunch of shots between 5 and 3, and then your team still loses the game, as the Warriors have done a lot this season, like they did when they blew the lead versus the Clippers the other night. But that's
the problem with Giannis is he has Dame on his team, and everyone's going to think of Dame as the clutch player, which is why he was the heavy favorite for most of the season.
And this is just shooting the breeze here, honestly. You know who's third? Only 2 behind Steph. And this is actually a really good answer. Do what?
Mikal Bridges?
Paolo Banchero.
Wow. Okay. Actually, and NBA First Three had him as one of the guys to keep an eye on as well. So
Paolo nails, and like the Magic need those shots. They need those shots in clutch time. Devin Booker is actually 4th with 9, tied with Anthony Davis and De'Aaron Fox, last year's winner. Mikal Bridges has slid to 8. Joe, do you have any final thoughts on clutch player?
I think Curry's has been incredible. And given the fact that we think that Golden State has a decent chance to make the playoffs and kind of progress, I think that really would help the argument as well. So I can't hate even laying the -160. He's got the name, he's got the pedigree. He's going to be somebody that voters want to award.
Okay. That's going to do it for Buckets. Hope you guys enjoyed this. Make sure to check out the Action Network podcast with me and Sean Little. We'll be breaking down title futures as well as MVP stuff. You can check that out in the Action Network feed on Tuesday. You can follow Joe Delara and Jim Turvey in the Action Network app. Jim's at Turvey Buckets, or Turvey Bets, not Buckets, Turvey Bets. Joe's at Joe Delara. By the way, Joe, Andrew O'Connor Watts, who has a very complicated name, changed his to NBA Watts. Like, he at least has like a handle that's not just his name. So whether it's ladder to Lara, something we got to do something about this.
Maybe I'll add
to try and
on the end.
There you go. My thanks to our audio producers, Matt Mitchell and the crew, for getting this up on podcast form. You should leave us a 5-star review. My thanks to our video crew for getting us up on youtube.com/The Action Network. Appreciate you guys being with us. Probably off Tuesday. I might get us a show on Wednesday for us to, or for Wednesday, just talk about something else. If not, we'll be back on Thursday with best bets for the show. Also, and WNBA free agency went absolutely nuts last week, and our own Jim Turvey alongside Maria Marino are going to have a special Wuckets episode for you this week. So I want you to go ahead and listen to that. There's value. There's gold in them dar hills. Go check out Wuckets and find some value. These markets, I'm telling you, are soft. Get in on this analysis. Find the value. You're going to find some stuff that you're going to want to bet before the WNBA season begins later in the spring. My thanks to everybody for joining us. We'll see you guys again next time. And until then, let's get buckets.